So we got a basic idea of how the MERN stack works and how the different pieces work together. As I mentioned throughout this course, you will not only get refreshers about the individual building blocks, but most importantly, we'll build an entire application where you can see all these pieces built out individually and then come together when we connect all the different blocks with each other. Now, this project which we're going to build is a project we of course have to plan before we dive into it. So in this module, I want to plan a React, or specifically the entire MERN project with you, because this hopefully also helps you approach your next project and get an idea of what you might want to keep in mind, what you have to think about before you get started, and how you can create a plan for the thing you're trying to build. Now, for that, there are a couple of general planning steps through which we'll walk in this module, so that by the end of the module, we have a clear plan of what we want to build and how we want to build it. The first step for that, of course, is that you need an idea. You want to solve some problem. That often or typically will not be a step you have to think about and specifically dive into, because more often than not, you will have an idea and then you want to start planning an app that solves the problem or that works on that idea. So this is only a rough first step, which typically can already be checked off the list by the time you're getting started. So the next step, the real first step after you have an idea, you want to solve a problem, is that you create a design. You sketch out the application you want to build. At least this is what I like to do if I'm building a front end. And that, by the way, is really important. The steps I'm giving you here are not the objectively correct steps you have to go through whatever you're trying to build. These are the steps that work for me. For you, the order might be different. Maybe you have some other step. Maybe you don't need a specific step. I'm really just sharing my personal approach here with you. So I got an idea and now I want to create a design. I want to sketch out the application. Now, when I talk about creating the design here, you could really work with design tools like Framer X or SketchUp or Photoshop and build your design there. Now, I'm not a designer and this is not a design course, so we're not going to do that here. Often, this is also a task you will probably outsource because chances are you want to focus on writing the code and you also are not a designer. Hence, here in this module, we'll just draw the general skeleton. We'll sketch out the application. We'll not really set up a specific design for this application here. Of course, we want to make sure it looks nice, but that's something we'll do when we implement it. I already prepared some nice styles and colors for you there. So once we got the general skeleton, we sketched out the general front end of this application, we of course also have to think about the data we work with, both in the front end, but also more importantly on the back end of our application. So we want to plan our data models, the data we or our app will work with. Which entities do we need and which data do we need to send across the wire from frontend to backend and then also from Node expressed to the database. This of course is a crucial part because that is a part that will affect all building blocks of your MERN application. Now once the data model is clear and we got our frontend sketched out, we of course have to plan our backend endpoints and the pages. You could put that into quotes because we don't really have more than one page, but the different components you could say you want to have on the front end in your single page application. These are the steps I want to go through together with you. We'll do it here in this module, and this is my rough planning process I go through whenever I approach a new project. Now, obviously, you can do way more work on all these steps. You can also come up with a complete design on your own. But as I mentioned, since this course is not primarily about designing and so on, I want to keep this module short and just give you a general idea of how this works. So let's dive into the first step, which is the idea which we need. Now, as I mentioned, often this is a step you can skip or which is skipped automatically because you already have a pretty clear idea of what you want to build and which problem you want to solve. In this course, I want to build an app with you where users can share places, their favorite places or any places they feel like are worth sharing, where each place has an image and a location and a title and so on with other users. So they can share it with other users. Or put in other words, if you're a user, a visitor in this application, you can view a list of users, you can click on a user, and then you see the places this user shared. The great thing about this app is that it's not too complex, and yet it has all the important pieces you want to have in such a demo app, which you will probably also need in the apps you're trying to build after this course. Specifically, we have all the core CRUD operations in there. So create, read, updating, and deleting will cover all of that. We'll be able to create users, create places, get users and get places, which is basically reading the data, update places, and delete places. So that's all in there, which is super important. In addition, we have more than one data model. We have users and places, and that helps us work with relationships as well. We also work with images, and hence we'll cover image upload, which is also a very important topic. And of course, we'll also validate user input to make sure that only valid data ends up in our database and on our backend in general. And last but not least, we'll have authentication and authorization in this course. The difference is that authentication means that users need to sign up or log in to work with some parts of our app. In this example, new places should only be creatable by logged in users. And authorization means that even if you are a logged in user, you're still not able to do everything. For example, in this app, updating or deleting places should not be possible for all authenticated users, but only for the users who created that place. So we got a lot of core important things in this app, which is why this makes for a great demo application for this course, and which is why this is my idea for the course project. So let's now have a look at the design sketching part. And as I mentioned, we'll not worry too much about the design when it comes to picking colors and so on. There, I will just provide you some colors I came up with in advance. Instead, here, I now want to focus on sketching out the front end of this application. So how this app should roughly feel, how the pages are connected, what should be visible on the user interface. For that, you can now have a look at my amazing drawing skills. Not, but I hope it will still be helpful. So what do we have in the front end of this application? Well, it all starts with the page we're visiting. And by the way, I'm drawing the desktop view here. We'll also build this application such that it looks and works great on mobile. But here I'm just sketching out the desktop view. So we'll start on some page where we probably want to have a header with some title of our application. So the name of the app, our brand, something like this. And then also some menu items on the other end of our header here. Now I'll come back to these menu items. Let's think about what we see on the starting screen. There, I want to have a list of users. So a couple of list items in the end, which simply are rendered beneath each other, where for every user, we have like an image of that user, the name, like Max or Manu, and then the number of places of that user. So the number of places that user shared. So maybe here I shared 2 places and Manu shared 1 place, let's say. And of course, we have more users here. So that's the starting screen. Now, when we tap a user, something should happen. Before we think about that, though, let's talk about the menu items I want to have in the header. There, it depends on whether we are authenticated or not. If we are not authenticated, then here in the header, I want to have an authenticate option. Here I'll just name it auth, you could name it login. So basically an option which we can tap to be taken to the authentication screen. If we are authenticated, Then here, I want to have an option to create a new place. So to be taken to a screen where we can simply, well, create a new place. I also want to have an option which should always be available, and that's basically the users list. So this starting screen here, that should always be available no matter if we are logged in or not. We could also say that this option, when we tap this, is basically also happening if we tap the title, because that is our starting screen of the app. So these two options here are basically equivalent, we could say. I think that would be a setup which should generally work. But now let's see what happens when we tap a user here. So when we click our user here, like menu, then I want to be taken to a new page. Now on that new page here, which is loaded, of course, we have the same header as before with the title and with our different menu options here. I'm not going to write them out again. These are the same options as you see up there. So instead, let's focus on the main area of this page. What do we see there? Well, menu has one place, right? Here's one place. So here I expect to see that one place. If you had more places, then I would expect to see a list of these places here. Now, that place should have an image, and we'll see how exactly we create this. We could have the image at the top here, for example, then the title, and then also options that allow us to interact with that place. For example, we can have a view on map button here. The idea is that when we click this or when we tap on this option, we open up this place or the location of this place in a modal, so in an overlay to the screen, where we can see that place marked with the help of Google Maps. In addition, I want to have two other buttons on the right here, an edit and a delete button, which we only see if we are the creator of that place. So that's only visible if creator, so if menu in this case, so if the logged in user who is viewing this screen is also the creator of that place. Otherwise, only the view on map button is visible. Now, when we tap that view on map button, as I said, I want to open an overlay which has a map, so which uses Google Maps to display the place on the map with a marker. That's the idea. What should happen when we tap this view on map button. So this is roughly how that could look like. We might also add a description so that we have the title and description here, but that's my general idea. The idea is not that we can tap this place to be taken to a new screen where we then view all the details, but that we can see all details or reach them, like in the case of the map, from this screen. But of course, that is something you could build differently. It's just the approach I want to go with here. Okay, so that is our list of places where we can also view place details. We get there from our list of users because every place is mapped to a user. So we have to tap a user first before we can see the places. Now, what about the other buttons we have there? The off button and the new button up there. Well, let's start with the off button. When we press this off button, I, of course, again, want to have my header up there with the same menu options we saw before. But then here, I want to have a form where the user has to enter some data, namely the email, the password, and also any other data we might need. For example, also a button which allows us to pick an image and so on. This all should be here. And then we need a button which allows us to log in or also switch the login mode so that we can basically toggle between login mode and sign up mode. And this will also affect what we see up there. So when we're in login mode, we of course only have to enter email and password. If we are in sign up mode, we will also need to provide the image and the name of the user and so on. So that's the authentication form, which we only are able to reach if we are not authenticated yet. Now, what about the use case that we are authenticated? Well, then we can, of course, press this new button here in the menu and go to a new page where we also see the good old header, but where we then can create a new place. And that is very similar to the authentication page with totally different fields, but the idea is the same. Here we have input fields to create a new place, also our image picker for the place, and so on. And then, of course, a button to add that place. That is the general idea here. We simply have a page which allows us to create a new place. Of course, when we tap this add button or when we tap the login button down there, we send a HTTP request to the backend where we will then basically send or attach all the data we picked here in the form, and then on the backend we can extract that data and create the user, create the place, and so on. Now, creating a new place is one thing. We also have this edit button here, right? So when we tap this, we also want to go to a new screen. And that should be a screen with the good old header we already know. And on that screen, I also want to see a form, a shorter form though, where we can edit some data, specifically the title and let's say the description of a place. Not image and address, but these two fields should be editable here. So we basically have like a shorter form of that create new place form here. We have a, well, shortened form to update title and description. This is what we could have here. Now, when we click the delete button, I want to open up a modal where we have to confirm the choice and basically have a chance to cancel the deletion process in case we click this button accidentally. Well, and that is my beautiful drawing, which basically lays out the front end of this application. Now, I can guarantee you it will look prettier than what I drew here, but this drawing here, this skeleton, which I sketched out here, basically gives us an idea of the flow of our app and how users can navigate through it. It gives us a rough first idea of the pages and components we will need there, and it basically helps us build the right application, the right React application for the app we want to build in the end. So that's my sketch for the front end. Now let's analyze which data we got in our application and which endpoints we need on the back end. Now we have an idea of how our application should roughly look like. Which data are we going to work with? Well, there are two main entities we heard over and over again in the last lectures. We have users in this application, and of course we have places. Now it's up to you which exact data you want to have on your user model and which exact data you want to have stored in your places. For me, in this demo application I came up with, I want to have users who have 4 key fields or attributes. Every user should have a name, an email address, a password, and also an image. Now, name and image are optional. We'll definitely need email and password in order to implement authentication, which of course requires an email-password combination. Now, for the places, it's also up to you, but there I want to have a title and a description for every place, a human readable address, so basically street name, city name, a location, which is a pair of coordinates, latitude and longitude, and also an image. Now, besides these two standalone entities, it's important to understand that of course they are related. Every user can create multiple places and therefore owns multiple places. And on the other hand, every place belongs to exactly one user. So implementing this relation and updating it correctly will also be a part of the application we're going to build. So we know about our data and how the front end should look like. Before we plan the different routes we want to have on the front end and which pages we need there, let's have a look at the back end. Which API endpoints will we probably need there? Well, since we have two main data models here, user and place, I got two main endpoint areas. Let's say we want to accept requests which reach our backend domain.com/API/users, and then there are a couple of specific routes which all start with API users, specifically /nothing. If a GET request reaches our backend domain/API/users/nothing else, then I want to return a list of all users. We'll need that for the page where we display all users and the number of places they created. If we send a post request to /API/user/signup, then I expect to have data attached, which allows us to create a new user, and then after this creation succeeded, also automatically log the user in. And you will learn what logging users in means in the context of a MERN app in the authentication module. When we send a post request to /login, we'll just log the user in. So I expect to have a password and email attached to that request. And then we'll skip the creation part because we assume this user already was created. We just try to log the user in. So these are our user-related routes. But of course, we also have places. So let's say for requests which reach our domain /API/places/user/UID, if that's a GET request, then I want to retrieve a list of all places for that given user ID. So the idea here simply is that we are able to get all the specific places a user created. If we get a GET request to just API/places/someplaceID, then I want to get that specific place by that ID. And important, both UID and PID, which have this colon in front of them, are dynamic segments. So what exactly is part of the URL here is up to the front end. This will be interpreted as a user ID or a place ID though. Now, if we send a post request to just API/places/nothing, then I want to create a new place and I expect that the data which is needed to create a new place is attached to that request. If we send a patch request to /API/places/someplaceID, then we want to update that place by its ID. This request will carry data in its request body as well. It needs to carry the data which we need for updating the place, namely the new title and the new description. And of course, updating is nice, but sometimes we also want to delete a place, and therefore I also want to have a delete route where we accept a delete request targeted at API/places/someplaceID, which will, well, delete that place by its ID. These are the endpoints we need. We have all the CRUD operations in there, we have authentication in there, and we will build them out step by step throughout this course. Now let's have a look at the front end. We already sketched it out, but now let's plan the specific page components we need there. So on the front end, we got a couple of pages, and namely when we open the app, when we just visit this website for the first time, we are on mycoolpage.com/nothing. What should be visible on this starting page? Well, I want to show a list of users there. So this list of users where we can click a user to then be taken to the places of that user. Speaking of that, we need a route, and now these are all front-end routes which are interpreted by React, or to be precise, a library that supports routing in React and which will not be interpreted by our backend. So we also want to have a route there on the front end for some dynamic user ID, which we don't know in advance, /places, which should load all the places for that specific selected user. I also want to have a /authenticate or /auth route, which shows us a page that holds the sign up and login forms between which we can toggle, and also a /places/new route, which shows us a new place form. In addition, we need a /places/someplaceID route, which leads us to the page where we see the update place forms, so where we can enter the new data for a selected place. Now, on the front end, not all pages are visible all the time. The list of users is always reachable, and so is the list of places for a selected user. These are always reachable no matter if we, the visitor of this page, are logged in or not. The only difference is that when we're viewing the list of places, when we're not logged in, or if we are logged in but we didn't create the places we're looking at, we'll not see the edit and delete buttons. We'll only see those if we are logged in and we're the creator of a given place. Now, if we are trying to authenticate, this page should only be reachable if we're currently not authenticated. Because if we are authenticated, it makes no sense to try to log in again. We already are logged in after all. Now, for new place and update place, it's the opposite. These pages, these front-end routes, should only be reachable by users who are authenticated, so who did log in or who did just sign up. And these will be our front-end pages. Now, you don't need to memorize all of what we walked through in this module. Instead, I hope that this module just helps you plan your next project. We will now go ahead and implement all these different things step by step in the different modules of this course. This is just our general agenda, and with that, we're well prepared to start working on the real code.